Adam to the flood. When God expelled Adam from paradise, he said to him, "In the sweat of thy face thou shalt eat thy bread." This meant that he would have to work very hard to make a living. Adam and Eve told their children the story of their happiness in paradise and how they had lost it through sin. They were very sorry that they had disobeyed God, yet they didn't lose courage. God had cursed the serpent. He had promised that a woman would crush his head. They told their children that someday God would save them from the effects of their sin. Adam and Eve had many children, grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren, and soon the human family became very large. The eldest children of Adam and Eve were Cain and Abel. Cain made his living from the fruits of the fields, the trees, and the vines. Abel was a shepherd. He led his sheep over the plains seeking for pasture. Adam and Eve taught their children how to adore God. They adored him by giving back to him some of their gifts. These gifts they burned up as they would never be given to, so that they would never be given to anyone except to God. They would make an altar, stack up some stones, and they would put their gifts on the altar and set fire to them. Such an offering we call a sacrifice. It tells God that we wish to honor him as our Creator, and that we know that we belong to him and depend upon him for all things. One day, Cain and Abel offered sacrifices to God. Cain offered the fruits of his field, while Abel placed upon his altar a young lamb from his flocks. God was pleased with Abel's sacrifice, but with Cain's he was displeased, because Cain did not give his gift with a good heart. Cain offered God what he couldn't use himself. Abel offered God the best that he had from his flock. When God rebuked Cain and pointed out to him the evil of his conduct, Cain became angry. He was jealous of Abel and too proud to realize that God was displeased with his sinful heart. Cain went off by himself and began to brood. Gloomy thoughts filled his mind, and the more he thought about it and what had happened, the more he hated Abel. Finally, he made up his mind to kill his brother, and he invited him to take a walk with him. Abel was glad to go because he felt sorry for Cain and hoped to comfort him. When they were far away and no one could see them, Cain killed Abel. As he gazed down on Abel lying dead before him, Cain heard the voice of God saying, "Cain, where is thy brother Abel?" Cain answered, "I know not. Am I my brother's keeper?" God said to him, "The voice of thy brother's blood cries to me from the earth. Cursed shalt thou be upon the earth, which has opened her mouth to receive the blood of your brother. When thou shalt till it, it shall not yield its fruits. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be upon the earth." Filled with great sorrow and remorse, Cain cried out, "My sin is so great that I can never be pardoned. Anyone that finds me will kill me." But God said, "No, it shall not be so. But whoever shall kill Cain shall be punished sevenfold." In other words, they will get 7 times the punishment. Then God put a mark upon Cain, so that whoever found him would not kill him. Now, Adam and Eve knew many things, more than we will ever know. They were created with the knowledge about everything produced in the natural world. Even though Adam lived for over 900 years, he was not able to pass on all of the things that he knew to his children, or even to his grandchildren. He taught them many things, but he could not teach them everything. Among the sons of Cain was Jabal, who was the father of such as dwell in tents and of herdsmen. So one of Cain's sons, Jabal, became a herdsman. He had sheep and goats and cattle. Another son, Jubal, was the father of them that play upon the harp for the organ. He made music. And Tubal came, who was a hammerer and an artificer in every work of brass and iron. So he knew how to work brass and iron. He knew how to make things out of metal. And Lamech, the most vengeful man of his time. Lamech was not a good man, trying to follow in the footsteps of his father. In place of Abel, God gave Adam another son named Seth. Now he had many other sons and daughters. These are not the only children of Adam and Eve. They lived 900 years. They had lots of children. And those children intermarried and had lots of other children. But they're mentioning these because they're the three most important of his children. Cain and Abel because that was the first murder. And Seth, because it was through the line of Seth that the Redeemer would ultimately come. Seth was pleasing to God, and from Seth was descended Enoch, of whom Scripture says he walked with God and was seen no more, because God took him. Enoch is supposed to come back. He didn't die. He was taken up into heaven, and he's supposed to come back at the end of the world, in the time of the Antichrist. Many of the descendants of Adam and Eve were disobedient, selfish, and wicked. The good people married the wicked people, and they became sinful. They no longer served God and soon forgot all about him. Noah. Since there were a few who believed in God and tried to serve him, among these were a good and holy man named Noah. God sent him 3 sons, Sem, Shem, and Japheth, who grew up to be good men like their father. They were obedient and loved and served God. When God saw how wicked the people had become, he said to Noah, I will send a flood to destroy them on the earth. Because Noah and his family were faithful and pleasing to God, he determined to spare them. He told Noah to make a great ark, or a houseboat. Now, an ark is a box. And that's what this was, a box. It was not like you see pictures of like a huge boat with a pointed prow. No, it was rectangular. It would be 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. A boat of such dimensions would be as long as 2 city blocks, as wide as 4 houses, and as high as a 5-story building. The ark had 3 stories, and each story had many rooms. There was a door and in the side, and there were windows in the top to let in air and light. When everything was finished, the ark was covered with pitch and tar to keep the water out. And Noah took into the ark his family, that consisted of his wife, Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. 8 people. And he also took some of every kind of animal. Noah did not have to go looking for the animals. God sent them to Noah. God chose the animals. God sent Noah very young animals. This was because young animals were smaller. This was very helpful considering some of the animals, like the dinosaurs, would be very large, but they're very small when they're young. When they're born, they're maybe only a few inches long. And also because they're young, they would live longer and produce more offspring once the flood was over. God sent Noah 2 of every kind of of unclean animal, and 7 of every kind of clean animal. He took both land and air animals, but not water animals. Why? Because the water animals didn't need to. It's going to be a flood. They'll be fine in the water. At the time when Moses wrote Genesis, some animals were considered clean, ones that could be eaten, and unclean were the ones that could not be eaten. Up until the time of the flood, all the animals were herbivores. That means they ate plants. So Noah only had to bring lots of water and grasses for the animals to eat. Noah did not take every single animal that we see in the world today. God only required Noah to take 2 to 7 of each kind or family. So he didn't have to bring every type of cat. God sent him a group that represented the cat family, and from which all other cats would be descended. This is equivalent in our classification system to the family group. So it was very possible for Noah to fit all the animals God required into the ark. Of course, the wicked people laughed at Noah for building a boat, though I don't think it really looked like a boat. It looked like a huge box, huge building with no windows and only one door, because you couldn't see the windows in the top because they were in the very top. They thought he was mad. Still, while they were ridiculing him, it began to rain. For 40 days and 40 nights it rained, as it had never rained before. As the Bible says, the fountains of the deep were opened, and that means it not only rained, but water came up. The oceans came up over the land as well. We'll look at that a little bit more in the next class. So, soon the rivers and seas overflowed their boundaries. Humankind and animals ran to the hills. Soon the hills were covered with water, and they ran to the mountains. The water rose higher and higher until it stood 20 feet over the highest mountain. Every living thing was drowned, but Noah and those who were with him in the ark were saved. For 5 months the ark floated upon the water. One day it came to rest on a mountain. At first Noah could see nothing from the window but water. After a time he saw the tops of some mountains, and then he knew that the water was going down. He waited 40 days longer, and then he sent out a raven. And the raven came back. So then he sent out a dove. He sent out a raven and a dove. The dove returned because it couldn't find a place to rest. A week later he sent forth a second dove. This time the dove returned carrying in its beak an olive branch with green leaves. So he knew then that the water had not only gone down, but things were beginning to grow again upon the flooded land. Even still, he didn't go out yet, because he didn't know that it was safe. He waited for God to tell him when. Noah, after 7 weeks, God spoke to Noah again. He said, "Go out from the ark with thy wife and all thy children that are with thee in the ark." This is a little over a year Noah and his family has been in the ark. Noah left the ark, grateful to God for having saved him and his family from the flood. So he built an altar to God and offered upon it many fowl and cattle. God was pleased with the sacrifice of Noah and promised him never more to destroy the earth by the waters of a flood. God set a rainbow in the sky as a sign of the promise he had made to reward the faithfulness of Noah. I suggest that you, as part of your lesson, you look at the video In Search of Noah's Ark. There will be links in the description, and there's also links in the PDF. You can find it on YouTube.